Rising over 15,000 feet in the French Alps is the peak Mont Blanc. Mont Blanc is one of the most famous mountains in the world, known for its climbing and being one of a group of 7 peaks known as the 7 Summits. The 7 Summits are the 7 highest peaks on each continent. It is also the site of 2 deadly plane crashes. On November 3, 1950, Air India Flight 245 took off from Sahar International Airport in Bombay, India. The Lockheed L749A Constellation took to the skies with Captain Alan R. Saint and co-pilot V.Y. Korakagar, 8 crew and 40 passengers. This particular plane was named the Malabar Princess. The Malabar Princess reached its cruising altitude and began to cruise toward Cairo International Airport for its first stop. After Cairo, its next destination was Cointrin Airport in Geneva, Switzerland. Ultimately, the final destination of the flight was supposed to be Heathrow International Airport in London. Upon descent into Geneva, the weather turned stormy. The L-49 and future versions were equipped with weather radar, but unfortunately for Flight 245, it was not an option on this plane. In the wintry weather, the pilots lost track of the face of the peak. Shortly after 10:43 a.m., Flight 245 struck the face of the 15,000-foot Mont Blanc. The last transmission from the cockpit to Geneva was, quote, "I am vertical with Voiron at 4,700 meters altitude." All souls were lost. Due to the immense height of the peak, rescue operations were incredibly difficult. After impact, much of the paper material was spread throughout the Alps region. Letters were found up to several years later and then still delivered. These letters were marked with an ominous stamp that read, quote, "delayed due to aviation accident." Letters from the flight were still being found up until 1978, when a sack was found at the base of the Bossens Glacier. The finding of these letters is one of the most eerie parts of this crash. It's almost like a time capsule of the disaster is spread throughout the Alps. All but 8 of these letters were actually mailed back to their original addresses. The other Air India flight that was claimed by Mont Blanc was Air India Flight 101. 16 short years after Flight 245 tragedy, the unthinkable occurred. Taking off once again from Sahar International Airport in Bombay on January 24, 1966, the Boeing 707 ascended into the skies above India with stops in Beirut and Geneva and a proposed final destination of Heathrow. In command of this aircraft was Captain Joe D'Souza with 11 crew and 106 passengers. Once again, the massif of Mont Blanc proved to be a huge problem, as they were instructed to descend into Geneva. D'Souza assumed his route was to take him past Mont Blanc, and as he started the descent, he felt he had already passed the 15,000-foot peak. Unfortunately, he had not, and Flight 101 slammed into roughly the same spot as Flight 245 had 16 years earlier. One of the main conclusions from the investigation stated, the pilot, who under the mistaken impression that he had passed the ridge leading to the summit and was still at a flight level which afforded the sufficient safety clearance over the top of Mont Blanc, continued his descent. Weather was not a factor in this crash, but pilot error was determined to be the cause. On the flight was Homi Bhabha, the chairperson of the Atomic Energy Commission of India. He was one of India's preeminent nuclear scientists and was nominated for the Nobel Prize in Physics several times. There is a theory that the United States had a hand in the downing of Flight 101. In the 2013 book Conversations with the Crow, CIA clandestine operations director Robert Crowley stated the CIA's intention of wanting to take out Bhabha because of his work on India's nuclear operations. He said, quote, "We had trouble, with India back in the 60s when they got uppity and started to work on an atomic bomb. The thing is, they were getting into bed with the Russians, and we did not want them to have any kind of nuclear weaponry because God knows what they would have done with it. Oh yes, and their head expert was fully capable of building a bomb. Name was Homi Bhabha. He was flying to Vienna to stir up more trouble when his 707 had a bomb go off in the cargo hold, and they all came down on a high mountain way up in the Alps. We could have blown it up over Vienna, but we decided the high mountains were much better for the bits and pieces to come down on. In this very callous and shocking statement, he all but lays out what happened to Flight 101. Whatever happened to the flight, the loss of life was tragic and staggering. The CIA did take down the plane. It may have been one of the most callous assassinations in the history of the agency. One man was apparently equal to the lives of over 100 others. This flight also left many items strewn beyond the icy terrain of the Alps. A bag of jewelry was discovered that was believed to be from one of the two flights. Much like the previous flight, the papers and mail survived the crash. In 2008, newspapers from the day of the crash that were on the plane were discovered. In 2012, a 20-pound bag of diplomatic mail was found. One of the largest finds was that of a metal box that contained 240,000 pounds in British currency, or $308,000 worth of precious stones. Since no relatives were found or any owners identified, the proceeds were divided between the finder and the Chamonix commune. Due to the frozen conditions and heavy snowpack, human remains have been discovered at the base of the Bossons Glacier, as well as parts from the Boeing 707 of Flight 101. Mont Blanc is one of the most beautiful peaks in the world. However, it holds a deadly past, along with many of the other world's tallest mountains. Thank you for watching this episode from Everything Has History. If you have not subscribed, please consider doing so. Throw down a like and a comment as well. And I'll see you on the next episode from Everything Has History.